It is now illegal for people who are openly trans to drive in the state of Kansas.
And we're already factually inaccurate.
And if you're not appalled by this, I am appalled by you.
Oh no. Friends, we've let him down. I've seen this story trending. I've got some strong thoughts and feelings on it, but I just did not get to it this week. So I decided to sit down and record a little bit of bonus content for y'all and discuss this. But basically, there's a very widespread backlash right now, particularly in LGBT and kind of progressive activist circles. A lawsuit has already been launched by the ACLU trying to stop it after Kansas, which has a Republican supermajority state legislature, has gone ahead and basically rescinded or canceled the driver's licenses of roughly, I think it's 1,500 to 1,700 trans individuals who had previously, when it was allowed, changed their sex. It's not a gender marker, it's a sex marker to an incorrect response. So like if the person is a trans woman, they would have changed back when this was allowed their sex to say female, even though their sex is male. Well, the new supermajority Republican legislature wants to cancel that out. And so they passed a law about a month ago enacting this change. And then letters just went out this week, post-dated, I think, Monday, informing people that their licenses had been rescinded and they had to get new driver's licenses. And it has led to some confusion, some pushback, some legitimate criticism of the policy change that I do agree with, and then also some unhinged hysteria across social media and the internet. So we're going to get into all of it. First, here is CNN. They're reporting, just summing up what's happened.
Around 1,700 people in Kansas are about to have their driver's licenses declared invalid. Why? Because they're transgender.
I was angry and terrified at the same time yesterday.
A new state law requires driver's licenses and birth certificates to list someone's sex as assigned at birth.
They told us that there was no grace period and that our driver's license and IDs would be invalid on February 26.
The law, SB 244, passed this month with a Republican supermajority in the legislature overriding Democratic Governor Laura Kelly's veto. Kansas officials expect to cancel about 1,700 driver's licenses and reissue up to 1,800 birth certificates. Other states restrict gender marker changes on IDs, but Kansas goes further, requiring some changes that were previously approved to be reversed. Siobhan Kirstein is a custodian at the University of Kansas who is transgender.
I've lived in Lawrence, Kansas for 8 years. I came here for grad school. I love this community. It is one of the best communities I've ever lived in. I have friends, despite the fact that we love this place, that we do not feel safe in Kansas anymore.
Gabriel Padilla is a math teacher in Wichita who is transgender. He told CNN he hasn't received a letter about his ID yet, but is expecting one.
Honestly, I just want to be Gabriel. And being Gabriel means having the same gender marker, having my birth certificate. Everything has changed.
Supporters of the law say it reflects what they describe as basic biology and a return to what voters want on gender policy. Those affected say it changes daily life.
This affected not only our ability to drive, but anything else that you use your ID for.
So there's a lot to say about this issue more broadly, but also about that CNN package that we just watched. Notice how they dedicated one sentence to try to articulate the Republican position here, and they interviewed two different transgender people who were affected and no one who supports the law or to provide like a balanced segment would have had one of these trans individuals and then also a supporter of the law or someone in the legislature or an activist who supports biological sex recognition and actually kind of tried to present both sides of the issue. But this was clearly a package meant to provide a very sympathetic perspective to the trans individuals, not necessarily an unbiased overview. Just be aware of that, though it's still worth, I think, listening to, but always have a critical thinking lens on it. Anyway, here's more from the Kansas City Star. Kansas informs trans residents their driver's licenses become invalid on Thursday. Here's the reporting. Transgender Kansans are being informed on the eve of a new state law going into effect that their driver's licenses will be considered invalid as of Thursday. Please note, and this is from the letter that was sent out, please note that the legislature did not include a grace period for updating credentials. That means that once the law is officially enacted, your current credentials will be invalid immediately, and you may be subject to additional penalties if you are operating a vehicle without a valid credential. That's what was from the letters that were mailed out by the Kansas Department of Revenue, their vehicles division. They were dated Monday. So these letters went out on a Monday, and as of the Thursday, so it takes a couple days for mail to get delivered. So it's possible that these individuals received a letter in the mail on Tuesday or Wednesday or Thursday that their license was now invalid as of Thursday. And this legislation included no grace period. That's the one, I think, because listen, we'll get into the reasons why, but I think it is fair and not, an insane attack on people's civil rights to have government documentation accurately list your sex. And your biological sex is an immutable characteristic based on the structure of your reproductive system. And so if your driver's license says sex, it should then list your correct sex. Now, maybe you could make the argument it doesn't need to be on there at all, or that it should say gender identity or something else, or that there could be an additional, it could list your sex as male and then another category that says gender identity as trans woman or something. But to me, it is not controversial. It is not dystopian, and it is not an attack on anyone's civil liberties to say that we actually have to accurately reflect your biological sex in your government documentation. I've always found it a head-scratching claim that you have a civil right to list inaccurate information on your government documents. But anyway, we're going to go through all of this. I will just say, though, that I think that is the most legitimate criticism and pushback, is that this is a way to do this, right? To not give them a 30-day grace period or something. Or other states have just mailed people new licenses. So I covered this in Florida when they made changes, and then some activists found a way to get around it. They just mailed them a new license that said their actual sex on it, and then a letter informing them their old license was invalid. So with 1,800 people or whatever, a better crafted bill or better policy could have been to send them new licenses. But it's not really fair to put someone in this jam where they have 24 hours to go get a new license, and they have a job or kids or a life, and they can't, if their license is invalid, they can't drive to the DMV. I do think the way that was done and carried out, I mean, you could argue they should be paying attention to the state legislature and know that a bill passed the month before. Sure, but a lot of people don't follow the news that closely. And I think there's no reason other than maybe spite or animus or incompetence to not have included some kind of grace period here. And I do think that is unreasonable and unkind. And so I don't support that aspect of this. But I will say that the response is just always so hyperbolic and over the top to anything. And especially when it comes to trans issues. You have people claiming this is going to be voter suppression in a way that makes no sense. You have people saying this is step 7 of the trans genocide, and we're going to go through all of it. I'm going to show you guys a clip from an Instagram video that, as of when I first pulled it, had 1.4 million views. And this guy is raising the alarm in a truly hysterical way about this policy that was just enacted in Kansas. Let's listen.
It is now illegal for people who are openly trans to drive in the state of Kansas.
And we're already factually inaccurate. It is not inaccurate. It is not illegal for people who are trans to drive in the state of Kansas. It is illegal to use driver's licenses that inaccurately state your sex. So a trans person, like a trans woman who presents as a woman and asks to be called she, her, and all of this, can drive in Kansas. They're just going to have a license that says male on it. I honestly, I know a lot of trans people who have always done that, who never changed the documents, and it wasn't that big an issue for them. So I just don't appreciate the over dramatization of this.
State of Kansas. That's an insane sentence, but it's true. The state of Kansas
Nope.
sent out letters demanding that trans people surrender their driver's licenses immediately and warned them that if they were caught driving with a license that didn't have their gender that they were assigned at birth, they could face up to 6 months in prison.
I mean, that's just a weird way of describing the same penalties that anyone could face for driving without a driver's license. See how this is all like very misleading, and yet millions of people are being presented with this as if it's fact?
Months in prison. Do you know who is allowed to have driver's licenses in Kansas? Murderers, rapists, people with 4 DUIs.
Well, like, I just don't understand what that has to do with anything. You know, it's like, okay, are murderers not supposed to be able to drive if they're out of prison? Maybe they should stay in prison, but if they're going to be let out of prison, I guess they have to drive to have a job and be rehabilitated or whatever. But it's like, also trans people are allowed to drive and have driver's licenses. They just have to list their biological sex on them. I don't understand. I mean, I do understand the reasons why this is, but I bemoan the fact that we are just incapable, especially on social media, of having any sort of reasonable discourse or nuanced conversation about literally anything ever without immediately descending into hysteria and misinformation and panic and fear-mongering.
No matter what these ignorant weasels say, this law is not about safety or protecting anyone. It's about bigotry. This law...
I think you're going to have a problem convincing people that accurately reflecting biological reality on paperwork is inherent bigotry. That's going to be a tough sell. Most people are not going to be on board with that, my dude.
This law is about 87 backwards prejudiced Neanderthal state senators who are so afraid of something they don't understand that they would rather strip 20,000 people of their civil rights than learn something new. If the government can do this to them, then the government can do this to you. And if you're not appalled by this, I am appalled by you.
Oh no. Friends, we've let him down. There's so much to unpack there, but like this idea that, well, if they can do this to trans people, they can do this to you. Like, what do you mean? I don't want any bad things done to trans people, but this doesn't apply to anyone else because no one else has their sex incorrectly listed on their driver's license. The law only says that if you have the wrong sex on your government documents, that they'll be canceled and you'll have to get new ones. So that literally, they can do this to you. They literally can't do it to anyone except the people for whom the law applies. Like, I don't understand what that's even supposed to mean. And I'm sorry, but it's not like Neanderthal ignorance or that we just don't want to learn something new, that we believe in biology and sex as an immutable characteristic. That's not that's actually... that's the opposite of that. That's like the objective scientific reality. And then these are the people, the kind of activist crowd who lobbied for this sort of thing, who are denying science and denying reality and saying you should be able to, because remember guys, this is not gender identity. For so long they told us, gender identity is something different. We acknowledge biological reality and biological sex. But then quietly they tried to redefine sex as gender identity and erase the concept of sex. So it's like your driver's license probably should and does need to reflect your biological sex to the extent that sex is relevant for, who goes in what locker room, or God forbid, like your birth certificates. Changing your birth certificate, I mean, how are we supposed to know who's actually male and who's actually female if you can go all the way back to your birth certificate and change everything? Because there are some aspects of society and civilization that we've decided biological sex matters, like prisons and who goes in what prison and who plays in what sport and many other things. And I have always and always will support, and I will push back on right-wing people who, the Michael Knowleses of the world, who want to, deprive trans people of rights, make it illegal for adults to transition, put them in insane asylums, other things. I totally reject all of that. I will always support trans adults' right to live however will make them happiest to the extent they're not hurting anyone else. But you cannot recast this as a civil right, that you have a civil right to list factually incorrect information on your government documents. I don't know. Do I have a civil right to put my height as 6 foot if I'm a 5'7" man? No, because it's like not true. You don't have this right. I don't know. I find this to be totally unreasonable and hysterical. I'm going to show you a second video where now we're getting the tinfoil hats out and they're trying to connect it to a conspiracy theory about suppressing votes that as I will explain, literally doesn't even make sense on its own terms. Listen to this from a trans, or I think it's actually a non-binary, but anyway, Instagram person. Listen to this.
The state of Kansas has just made it illegal for trans people to drive. And if that sounds like a violation of human rights, that's because it is.
Yeah, when you just lie about what's happening, that's actually bad. It's made it illegal for trans people can drive. They just have to get a driver's license that has their sex listed correctly. I don't know. Like, could we just have some commitment to factual reality before spreading things to thousands and thousands of people on the internet? I understand that's a crazy take these days.
It is. And it isn't a stretch to see that combined with the SAVE Act, which is trying to require people to have unnecessary identification while voting.
By that, she just means any identification.
While voting is an obvious effort to stop trans people and other folks from voting. This isn't about safety by any means, and is a coordinated effort to dehumanize trans people. Obviously, you should care about this no matter who you are, but the reality is, if they would do this to someone else, why wouldn't they do it to you too? They won't start by rounding up all the trans people in this country, but they will start by invalidating our documents and taking away our rights till we have nowhere else to go.
So I want to talk about the aspect of this where it's like, well, they're pushing the SAVE Act, and I've discussed the SAVE Act at great length elsewhere, but the SAVE Act is federal legislation that would do two things. It would require that you show photo ID when you're casting your vote in any federal election. So like you'd have to show a driver's license, a passport, a tribal ID, a military ID, a generic state ID, when you're actually casting your vote. And that's what this person, and then there's also the question of what you would have to do to register to vote, but that's separate. That would have, that's where your birth certificate comes in and other things. But specifically what this person is referring to is having to show your ID at the ballot. Well, they're combining this trans policy with the SAVE Act maybe passing. Kansas already has voter ID at the state level. So the SAVE Act would change nothing on that front. So there's no connection there. The tinfoil is not tinfoiling. You haven't done your big one and uncovered some secret plot to take away trans people's right to vote, which honestly, like if they were trying to do that, I would agree. And I'd say that's crazy, but they're just not. And I'm just like in touch with reality. I don't know what to tell y'all. But the other thing too is like, she's acting like trans people can't get a driver's license at all. They just get one that lists their biological sex, and then they can show it at the ballot box and vote. I don't understand what part of that this person's just totally misinterpreted, but it's almost like, and I can't say this definitively, but I watched so many of these videos, and I just picked a couple to show you, but there's tons of videos just like this all across TikTok, Instagram, all the short form video platforms, and they all make a couple points. They all that are like literally false, like trans people, it's now illegal to drive in Kansas. They could do this to you. Like, it's almost like talking points went out. Not to put on my own tinfoil hat, but this is how social media paid influencer campaigns work, where talking points go out from activist organizations that pay creators they have kind of like a pre-existing relationship with. And I don't know whether that's what happened here, but I wouldn't be shocked if it was, because the propaganda is like eerily coordinated, but I'm really just not buying it. And of course, it was embodied by Democratic lawmakers. They really have gone all in on this stuff. Ed Markey, the senator, Democratic senator, wrote on X, "Trans people deserve IDs that reflect who they are. Bills like this undermine the basic rights of trans people and put them at risk of serious harm. No one can erase trans people's existence." Rashida Tlaib, the congresswoman, writes on X, "Revoking the driver's licenses of thousands of Kansans is blatant discrimination and puts them in immediate danger. Trans rights are human rights." I find this idea that you are put in danger, like imminent physical danger, by having to update your driver's license, a tad hysterical. I mean, I've already acknowledged that I think they should have been given a grace period, like 30 days or something. But I just put my own shoes. If I got a letter in the mail today that said, as of today, your driver's license is canceled, it is invalid, and you have to go get a new one, obviously that would be inconvenient, and I'd have to drop everything and go to the DMV and get a new driver's license. But at what point would I be put in danger? Like, do words have any meaning anymore? Or I guess I'm doing this annoying thing where, like, I ask rhetorical questions I already know the answer to. They don't. Like, the dictionary is a battered housewife at this point, just slapped. They're just constantly pummeling the dictionary, and she really didn't do anything to deserve it, and it's not okay, but they don't stop. And then, I'm sorry, trans people deserve IDs that reflect who they are. I have no problem calling a trans person who is actually trans and, like, not a fetishist or a creep or a non-binary. I have no problem with calling them what they'd like prefer to be called, but IDs who reflect what they actually are in terms of their sex. Remember, what's listed is male or female, their sex, not their gender identity. What you're saying actually agrees with the Kansas Republican legislature. You just are too delusional to realize that. If everyone has a right to an ID that reflects who they are, then everyone's ID should reflect their sex. That their actual sex, if it lists sex. That's just, I don't think that's, like, crazy. And the recasting of all of this as if it's some dystopian assault on civil rights, I think is so counterproductive and so inflammatory, and riles people up in these online spaces where they feel they're under attack. And to be honest, I mean, it's a tough time to be a trans person at the moment, for sure. And they are under a lot of cultural criticism and scrutiny and getting a lot of backlash in ways I don't necessarily support. But this is not one of them. And, like, I'll read you this statement, of course, because the activists always have to make everything worse. The Human Rights Campaign, the biggest LGBT organization, absolute grifters, wrote on X, or I think this is actually Facebook, without driver's licenses, we can't drive a car, earn a living, rent an apartment, and in some places even vote. They want to take these rights away from us simply because of who we are. If they can do this to one of us, they can do this to all of us. Remember when I said the talking points went out? Yeah, the talking points definitely went out. But like see how they're just lying. They're saying you can't have a driver's license, and they're suggesting that lawmakers are trying to take away the right to drive a car, have a job, rent an apartment, and vote from trans people. That isn't happening. That's not real. So you're just lying and scaring people and making them think they're Anne Frank in the Holocaust, basically, like, when they're just not. And then that's when people go do crazy things or reach desperate places where they could end up being violent or acting out in very scary ways. And, like, you should have some minor commitment to factual reality or some minor sense of responsibility with your platform. But when it comes to these kinds of issues, none of them do. None, like zero. And that is not exclusively a left-wing or LGBT phenomenon. Obviously, that is very true with lots of right-wing influencers and conservative media outlets. But when it comes to this particular topic and this kind of discourse, it's just everything is so out of control. Everyone's lost touch with any sense of nuance or reality or scale. And everyone needs to take a big, deep breath. It's going to be okay. Not everything is a 10 out of 10 dystopian level alarm. And actually crying wolf like this is part of the reason why people don't take it so seriously when actually things are going too far in some ways, because you guys acted like every little thing and minor change was like a mass casualty extinction level event. It's exhausting, even for me. And I get paid to sort through their BS. So I don't know, guys. You'll have to let me know what you think of this change and of the discourse surrounding it more broadly. Let me know in the comments. Make sure you are subscribed. If you aren't yet, hit the like button while you're at it. And that'll be it for this bonus episode of the Brad versus Everyone podcast. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll talk again real soon.